I was shocked because I placed so much emphasis on my brain that when my spirit form lifted out of my body, I was like, oh, I'm so clear. This is truly the true me.
I wrote down everything that I remembered about the angels because I was afraid I was getting morphine in the ER. And I was afraid this medicine might make the NDE go away. And I was like, I have to remember this.
The story happened actually before my near-death experience. And there are stories about angels that have appeared in human form.
This is the story of Trisha Barker, a student from Texas who on a seemingly regular day died in a car accident. But her story does not end like this. Trisha came back from the dead. Coming back from the dead is already shocking enough, but what's even more unbelievable is what she revealed about the moments she was gone, about what she saw after death. So how did she manage to come back? And what did she see over there that made her return to share it with the world? We are going to find out in this video. Who is Trisha Barker? Trisha Barker's story started in the quieter, rural parts of Texas, where she spent her childhood surrounded by nature. But don't let the peaceful setting fool you. Trisha's life was about to take some unexpected and downright shocking turns. Growing up, Trisha was one of those kids who had a deep connection with the great outdoors. She loved spending time in wide-open prairies with horses and walking alongside rivers. She and her friends would saddle up their horses and ride out into the open fields, losing themselves in the beauty of the Texas landscape. They would have the time of their lives, just being kids, jumping into rivers, picking wildflowers, and enjoying the simplicity of life far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. But as idyllic as her childhood might sound, it was not all sunshine and rainbows. Trisha had a tough side to her upbringing as well. Behind the scenes, there was a darker reality she had to face: her mother's mental illness. This was not just a small issue, it was something that deeply affected Trisha. Her mother's condition led to outbursts that were both physical and psychological, and Trisha often found herself on the receiving end of this pain. It is no surprise that she started to retreat into her own little world, finding solace in nature and the outdoors, where she could escape from the turmoil at home. Books became Trisha's refuge. She buried herself in reading, seeing it as an escape from the harsh realities of her life. Her love for learning became a lifeline for her. The more she read, the more she wanted to learn, and this passion for knowledge turned her into a standout student. Trisha's grades were nothing short of impressive, and all that hard work paid off. She earned over $20,000 in scholarships, enough to secure her place at the University of Texas, which was a top-tier university that was a world away from the rural life she knew. However, life at the University of Texas was not exactly what Trisha had expected. The academic environment she had thrived in during her younger years seemed to fade away as she entered the college scene. The campus culture leaned heavily towards partying, and unfortunately, Trisha got swept up in it. What started as a few nights out turned into a regular routine of partying and drinking. The straight-A student who had once been so dedicated to her studies began to lose her way. Her grades, which had been stellar in her first semester, started to slip. She went from being at the top of her class to becoming just another average student. The college party lifestyle took its toll on Trisha, and things only got worse when she went through a rough breakup during her senior year. It was a turning point that sent her spiraling into a deeper state of unhappiness. The once vibrant, nature-loving girl now found herself battling depression and anxiety. Trisha started having panic attacks and found it difficult to cope with the overwhelming stress. For the first time, Trisha began to think seriously about life and death and the concept of spirituality. Though she had grown up agnostic, she began questioning what happens after we die. She did not subscribe to the idea of a traditional afterlife like many religions teach. Instead, she thought maybe we just pass on in some other form, or perhaps there is nothing after this life at all. But even with these beliefs, the idea of not existing anymore was terrifying to her, something she struggled to come to terms with. In an attempt to pull herself out of the darkness, Trisha's therapist suggested she reconnect with one of her old passions, which was running. Running had always been a way for Trisha to clear her mind, so she decided to give it another shot. She set her sights on the Austin 10K marathon and began training hard, running 8 to 10 miles a day. It was a step in the right direction, something that gave her a sense of purpose again. But the night before the big race, something happened that shook her to her core. What exactly? The accident. The next morning, Tricia skipped her usual morning coffee as she was feeling a bit off but eager to get to the marathon. Little did she know that this ordinary drive was about to change everything she thought she knew about life. She hopped into her car and set off, the excitement of the race keeping her focused. As she drove, everything seemed normal until she approached a junction. The light was yellow and Tricia, like many of us would, decided to push the gas and make it through before it turned red. It seemed like a routine decision, nothing out of the ordinary, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. As she crossed the line, everything changed in an instant. Out of nowhere, a car from the opposite direction came speeding towards her. There was no time to react, no time to think. The two cars collided with incredible force, Tricia's car moving at nearly 60 miles an hour. In the blink of an eye, her world was turned upside down. The impact was so intense that Tricia immediately knew something was horribly wrong. She could not move. Her body felt like it was locked in place, and a wave of fear washed over her. A bystander who had witnessed the entire accident rushed over to help. It was one of those moments where everything slows down and the only words Tricia could muster were, "God help me." The pain was excruciating, but the terror of not knowing what would happen next was even worse. The ambulance arrived quickly and she was rushed to the ER. Every second felt like an eternity as she was wheeled into the emergency room, her mind racing with fear and confusion. The hours dragged on, 17 hours to be exact, before a surgeon finally arrived. The surgeon reassured her that she would walk again, but there was a catch. Before the surgery, Tricia had to sign a waiver, and what she saw written on it sent a chill down her spine. She read that there was a 17% chance that she might not survive the operation. That number hung in the air, but Tricia, surprisingly, was not focused on it. Instead, her mind was consumed by the fear of not being able to walk or return to school, so she agreed to get the surgery. As she lay on the operating table, the last thing she remembered was the surgeon holding her hand as she drifted off into unconsciousness. And then, something extraordinary happened. The next thing Tricia knew, she was not in her body anymore. She found herself looking down at her own physical form on the operating table. It was surreal. She was there, but not really there. She realized she was a spirit completely separate from her body, and a wave of excitement rushed over her. Finally, she had the answer to the question that had plagued her thoughts. What happens after we die? In this ethereal state, Tricia felt completely free. Free from pain, free from fear, free from all the tensions that had burdened her in life. Everything was clearer, more vivid, and she was acutely aware of where she was. As she observed the operating room, she noticed something incredible. There were large beings of light present, channeling their energy through the surgeons. These beings were also interacting with her, communicating in a way that was beyond words. Tricia was in awe, witnessing a power that was unlike anything she had ever imagined. But just as she was absorbing this new reality, something went terribly wrong. Her physical body, still on the operating table, began to deteriorate. Internal bleeding caused her heart to flatline, and the room was thrown into chaos. This meant the physical body of Tricia, who was lying on the table, had died. So what happened next? Spiritual journey. In her ethereal form, Tricia decided to drift out of the operating room. She left her physical body behind. What a strange yet liberating feeling it must have been, almost like being in two places at once. As she floated through the hospital, she noticed her relatives gathered in the waiting area. They were clearly worried as they were praying fervently for her recovery, sending all their hopes and love into the universe. Without warning, Tricia was suddenly pulled upwards, soaring into the sky. She was not just hovering above the hospital anymore, she was way up, looking down at the entire city. The view was breathtaking, like having a bird's-eye perspective on everything she once knew. But this was not just about seeing the world from a different angle. It was about seeing the big picture, quite literally. In the next blink, she found herself floating among the stars, surrounded by the vastness of space. She was seeing galaxies swirling and stars twinkling all around her. She could not believe her eyes. And then something extraordinary happened. A being of light approached her. This was a presence filled with wisdom and warmth, and it radiated messages that went straight to Tricia's soul. The being shared with her some of the most profound truths about life, things that seem so simple yet held incredible significance. One of the messages was that love is the most important thing we can carry with us. Love, it seemed, was the thread that connected everything: people, nature, the universe. The being also encouraged her to reconnect with nature and to embrace the innocence and curiosity of a child. These random pieces of advice were guiding principles meant to shape her life. As Tricia absorbed these lessons, she was shown scenes from her own life, almost like a highlight reel, but with a focus on moments that needed her attention. She saw herself as a child, full of wonder and joy, and realized that she needed to reclaim that childlike spirit. But it was not all positive. Tricia also saw the times when she had been judgmental or unkind. She had always considered herself better than others, especially those who had not gone to college. She remembered working part-time jobs where she often looked down on her coworkers, thinking they were somehow lesser because they worked those jobs full-time. One particularly humbling memory was of a couple she had worked with who, despite facing their own struggles, prayed for her well-being and for her to overcome her depression. Tricia had dismissed them as being out of touch, judging them for superficial reasons like their clothes or their lifestyle. But now, seeing their kindness and sincerity from this new perspective, she regretted her arrogance deeply. It was a harsh but necessary realization. After this life review, Tricia found herself in a new place. This one was lush, vibrant, and filled with greenery. Instinctively, she knew she had arrived in heaven. What did she see there? Did she meet anyone? A bittersweet meeting. The peace she felt there was unlike anything she had ever experienced. For the first time, she was completely free. No pain, no sorrow, no burdens weighing her down. It was a place of pure calm where she could finally just be. Just when Tricia thought her journey could not possibly get any better, she experienced something that took her joy to a whole new level. Out of the glowing heavenly light, her grandfather appeared. This reunion was someone incredibly special to her. Her grandfather, who had passed away from leukemia, looked nothing like the sick man she remembered. Instead, he was radiant, glowing with light, and more handsome than ever. Seeing him there, so full of life, was like a dream come true for Tricia. He had been her rock, the one person in her childhood who she felt truly connected to, despite all the chaos in her life. With pure happiness radiating from them both, Tricia and her grandfather did what felt most natural. They went for a drive together. Yes, even in heaven, they took a ride in his old pickup truck, just like they used to do. The comfort and familiarity of that moment were everything to Tricia, and it made her feel even more at home in this new spiritual world she found herself in. As they cruised along, her grandfather turned to her with a question. He asked, "Do you want to continue on?" And without hesitation, Tricia instinctively knew there was more to this incredible experience. She looked up and saw that what she was experiencing was just the beginning, a small taste of something much greater. She felt an overwhelming pull to move forward, to explore this new realm, and before she knew it, she was soaring through the skies again, feeling more relieved and joyful than she ever had in her earthly life. This feeling was pure, unfiltered bliss. The kind of joy that makes every good moment on earth seem pale in comparison. She could not imagine anything on earth ever coming close to the level of euphoria she felt at that moment. As she flew higher and higher, she eventually reached a barrier of energy, an energy wall, if you will. This was it, the final step separating her from God. She could feel the immense power and love on the other side, and she knew that crossing this wall would bring her face to face with the divine. But just as she prepared to cross, something unexpected happened. God spoke to her gently but firmly. He told her to look down, and what she saw was both beautiful and sobering. Below her, she saw an endless river with countless people walking along or beside it. Some of them were glowing with light, just like the beings she had seen earlier, while others appeared as shadowy figures. In that instant, Tricia understood that the glowing figures were those connected to God, living in His love, while the shadowy ones were disconnected, living in fear, even in a place as beautiful as heaven. And then, just as suddenly, Tricia received one final message. God gave her an instruction clear as day. She was going to be a teacher. Now, this was the last thing Trisha had in mind. She had big dreams of becoming a lawyer, making a lot of money, and using her writing skills to climb the corporate ladder. The idea of being a teacher, a profession she viewed as low-paying and not part of her grand plan, did not sit well with her. She wanted to protest, to argue that she had different ambitions, but before she could even get the words out, she felt herself being pulled back. It was as if God decided for her, sending her spiraling back down to earth, straight into her body. When Trisha woke up, she was overwhelmed with the need to share everything she had just experienced. Her heart was racing, her mind was buzzing, and she could not keep quiet. She immediately began talking. She started talking about everything she had seen and heard. Grabbing nurses and doctors as they passed by, she asked them questions like, "Do you believe in God?" She needed to know if they could possibly understand what she had just been through, or if they had ever heard of anything like it before. So what happened after that? Did she fulfill her purpose? Life after that. After waking up from her extraordinary experience, Trisha felt an overwhelming need to document everything she had seen and felt. She grabbed a journal and began writing down every detail, trying to capture the essence of her journey in words. It became a form of therapy for her, a way to make sense of the incredible things she had witnessed. When she was finally discharged from the hospital and allowed to go home, she could not wait to share her story with her family. But when she sat down with her mother and grandmother, she quickly realized that not everyone was ready to believe her. Her mother was skeptical about this whole experience. This is when she realized that sharing her experiences and spreading the message of love she had received was not going to be easy. Despite the challenges, Trisha felt the call to follow through on the mission she had been given. She completed her education, earned her teaching certification, and stepped into a classroom for the first time. Standing in front of her first class, Trisha felt a moment of doubt. What could she possibly say to these young people? She hadn't planned on being a teacher, and neither had they planned on having her as one. But as she began to speak, she shared her story, and the students listened in stunned silence. The flood of questions that followed made her realize something important. This was exactly where she was meant to be. The calling she had received was real, and it was through teaching that she could spread the love and light she had experienced on the day she died. Now, Trisha lives in Texas, sharing her story with anyone who is willing to listen. Her books, like Be the Light of Your Own Healing, have become bestsellers. They have touched the lives of many who seek comfort and understanding in their own journeys. Have you ever had a similar near-death experience or know someone who did? Share the story with us in the comments below. If you want to hear more shocking stories, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because we have got a lot more of this. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.